Hello everyone, welcome to this new video about the tier list for Star Wars Unlimited. We are reaching almost the end of every single card in the game. Of course, we're still going to have to do base and leader, but for today, we're going to jump right into it with R2-D2. So R2-D2 used to be one of the best one drop in the game. Just a 1/4 for 1 is a lot of stats, and the ability comes to play when he plays, and every time he attacks. He's also a rebel, which means that he can be boosted by wing leader. You can put some upgrades on him, and he becomes a pretty big nuisance. You play it in Luke, play him on turn 1, give it a shield. I think R2-D2 is pretty good. With that being said, the game has changed a lot since we were just playing with basic core set and just a few cards, and until that point, basically the idea of boosting up a unit early on in a game like this has become a lot less viable as an option. There's a lot more things you can do. Power the dark side early on in the game after you place like an entrench on your R2, it's gonna get him killed. Waylays, of course, still there, very much a nuisance. Obviously, Traitorous also very good on a boosted R2, on anything that is boosted, by the way. So there's a lot of things that now the game has changed a lot in such a way that the R2 doesn't really do what he used to be. It's not as good as it used to be. The when play on attack effect is simply not that amazing. He still does see play, I think specifically in Luke deck, because 1/4 shielded for 1 is actually not bad. With that being said, in the current ecosystem, one attack simply doesn't do that much. Like, one attack is just doesn't really kill that much. There's not that many units that has 1 health in the game. So in the current ecosystem, R2 usually doesn't have enough of an impact to be worth playing. It still sees a little bit of play. I think you can guarantee that as soon as we're going to see more units with 1 health making an appearance in the game, you can be guaranteed that you're going to see R2 a lot more. Because then his 1/4 stat line is going to be great, and coming into play so cheap, and being a rebel and being able to be combined to get a shield on turn 1 with Luke, all this is going to be great for him. With all that being said, right now R2-D2 doesn't see a lot of play. He is definitely playable. I'm going to place him in C tier. I'm gonna place him probably right under Malbus. Yeah, in mid C tier. Next we got Alliance XWing. So Alliance XWing is a card that is very simple and yet sees a lot of play. And the reason is because aggro decks simply need 2 drops. And they need 2 drops in space, because in space it's a lot harder to interact with units in space than units on the ground. So if you can open up with a space unit and your opponent doesn't have anything to interact with them, you're gonna have a unit that's gonna deal damage over and over and over again, which is exactly what aggro wants to do. So just simply having more 2-drop in space that can put pressure on the opponent is something that aggro values very highly. And that's the reason why, despite being a very simple card, Alliance XWing sees plays in almost every single aggro deck. And not only that, he's also Heroism, so he works with for a cause I believe in, and he's also a rebel, which means that he gets boosted by a lot of other cards, which we'll talk about right after. And in this card, that's basically end up seeing a lot of play, so it ended up being a pretty solid card. So we're gonna place, for all those reasons, we're gonna play Alliance XWing in the B tier category. It's just simply a card that currently sees a lot of play. So obviously it's not on the same level as Arc 170, but honestly it's very close. It's because the Restore 1, yeah, it's cool, but it's not like super relevant. The relevant part is really having this early game threat in space. So I'm gonna place this basically over Snowtrooper Lieutenant, under Bending 2 Tubes in the B tier category. Next we got C3PO. C3PO used to be a card that would see a lot of play because a lot of people were playing R2, and if you're playing R2, then C3PO is a good combo with it. You can play him, and you're gonna have a much more reliable way to draw a card with C3PO. C3PO has a lot of problems though. First of all, as I said, 1/4 stat line in the current ecosystem doesn't do a whole lot. The second problem is that drawing card in Star Wars Limited is not really that big of a deal. Third problem, very unreliable, especially if you're not playing R2-D2. And then final problem is the fact that simply in the early stage of the game you can't really afford anymore to spend 2 resources just to have a card that's just gonna draw you a card over time. So C3PO has just fallen off a lot, and I think in the current I have a very hard time justifying C3PO in the current in the way the game currently works. It's just very unreliable, very difficult to use. I don't think there's any deck that wants to play that card anymore. Obviously, it's a card that has lots of strong potential. Imagine if this card was in Villainy, you could play it in Thrawn and draw a card every time, and that would be absolutely insane. But currently, in the way the game currently works, C3PO is very unreliable and does not really do something that you want to do in the early stages of the game. So for all that reason, it's a hard call. I'm gonna place it in D tier. I might be wrong about this. Some people might see there might be a case where C3PO can be good, especially in double blue Heroism. But double blue Heroism is not really that good in my opinion. So for me, that's not really enough of an argument to push this card into C tier. Like for example, you can see card like TIE Fighters or Vanguard Ace, which are the bottom of C tier. Those cards are actually pretty good in the cards in which they belong. And the decks in which they can be played are actually very powerful. Like Vader, I think Vader Green is still a very strong deck, and Vanguard is also a very strong deck. Here the problem is double blue in general. Double blue white is not really a great color combination. Is not really a very strong deck, and even those decks will not be playing C3PO most of the time. Sometimes they will, but very rarely. This is really the bottom of the barrel, like in terms of what you want to have for your deck. Next we got Rebel Pathfinder, a card that basically sees play for the exact same reason as for the Alliance XWing. It's the early 2-drop play that is going to put some pressure on your opponent, has a Saboteur keyword. Saboteur keyword not super important on the card that is so small, but it's just a 2-drop that is Rebel, that has that is Heroism, that the Rebel players are going to be happy to play in some aggro decks. With that being said, among the 2-drops you can play in Heroism, in my opinion, this one is probably the worst one that's going to make the cut. So it sees play, but it's very, very, very situational. Personally, me in my personal version of aggro, I always find something better to play. If I'm playing yellow, I'm going to be playing the Lothal Insurgent. I think Alliance X-Wing is a lot better than Rebel Pathfinder. I think being a space unit is a lot better than having a Saboteur. So for me, this is going to be C tier for the Rebel Pathfinder. I'm going to place this in the middle of C tier, probably below the 4th, maybe over Infiltrator Skill. Like, it's really a card that doesn't see that much play. That sees a decent amount of play, but that's really once again, it's the bottom of the barrel. It's really like the last 2-drop you want to play. If you want to have more 2-drops, okay, you jam a couple of Rebel Pathfinder in there, and you're okay with that. Next, we got Fleet Lieutenant. So Fleet Lieutenant is a card that has been an absolute staple of pretty much all Heroism deck. And this card is interesting because it's very similar to Snowtrooper Lieutenant, but in the context of Heroism, this is so much better because, first of all, it's a very aggressive card. Heroism is a much more aggressive aspect. Heroism aggression is really very aggressive, and Fleet Lieutenant is perfect because it gives you this extra push of damage. There's so many strong Rebel units in the game, especially a lot of strong Rebel 2-drops, so you can play your 2-drops and then play your Fleet Lieutenants on turn 2. Put a 3/3 on the board, which is so much better than a 2/2. Here, for example, the extra +1/+1 for an extra cost is definitely 100% worth it. And then he also is Rebel himself. He has the Heroism aspect, once again super important for a cause I believe in. Basically, the reason why the Rebel trait is so important in Star Wars Unlimited is mostly because of that card. This card is absolutely incredible. It does so many push extra damage, put a body on the board, can be used for also can be used to kill larger units. It's just incredibly flexible and sees tons and tons of play. Almost in mid-range deck, it also sees play, but obviously it's mostly a mainstay in aggro deck. It is going to be an A tier card. I'm gonna rate this card over Yoda, over aggression. Um, uh, how far are we willing to go with that card? Because the fact it's not as strong as some of those other cards, but it sees plays in so many different decks. I'm gonna rate this under 4th throw, maybe over redemption. It's really a strong card. Another card that is also very similar is Wing Leader. So Wing Leader, very similar to Fleet Lieutenant. Instead of giving you a 3/3, he gives you a 2/1 in space. But instead of giving +2/+1 and attack right away, he gives you 2 experience token, which are 2 permanent +1/+1 counters. So obviously there's some situation where you prefer to play Wing Leader. There's some situation you prefer to play Fleet Lieutenant. Most of the time, Fleet Lieutenant is better than Wing Leader because it has this immediate impact that is impossible to interact with. While the wing and gives you a 3/3 body is really better than the 2/1. Even in space, a 3/3 body on the ground is better than 2/1. And Wing Leader can be interacted in a lot of ways. I'm gonna basically repeat the same argument as I was saying earlier with R2D2. Is that boosting a unit with +1/+1 counters is very dangerous in this game. There's a lot of things the opponent can do to interact with it. So does that mean Wing Leader is a bad card? Absolutely not. Wing Leader still sees tons of play. He's pretty much a staple in almost every aggro deck. It's an incredible card on the same, almost on the same level as Fleet Lieutenant. So some people have a tendency to cut it out of the deck because a lot of people simply prefer to play Fleet Lieutenant and cannot play both of the cards in the same deck. But it doesn't change the fact that Wing Leader is a great card and sees a tons of play and see play pretty much in every single aggro deck. And for that reason, it deserves the A tier status. I'm gonna rate it a lot lower than Fleet Lieutenant, but it's really a great card. I'm gonna put this between TIE Interceptor and Shoot First. I think it's a good place for it. It's a very strong card. Used to be much better than now, but still is a card that is very good. Then we got General Dona. General Dona is a card that I prefer over his villainy counterpart, which is General Veers, for quite a few reasons. First of all, the 4/4 stat line is really much better than 3/3, much easier to keep it alive. And the fact that it's easier to keep alive is so important because his ability really requires him to stay alive to have an impact. Another big factors with General Dona that I like is the fact that because he's harder to kill, he is also more impactful, and he's also rebel. He's rebel heroism, which is very relevant as once again in those aggro decks. In the mirror of aggro, it's a very strong card because the aggro player most of the time is not really going to be able to afford to. It's going to require him so many resources to kill the Dona, and at the same time, if Dona stays alive, he's going to lose the game. So there is some specific context in which this card can be very strong. If you're playing also a white-blue deck and you can play Dona and then you can protect him because you can put him a shield on him for free using the security complex, can also be very nasty. So it's a card that has basically has worked quite well. It's not a staple by any means. It's still a very niche card. It's still a card that a control deck will simply not care about this card. Very easy to kill. You're talking about a 4-drop that doesn't have an immediate impact on the board. That is relatively easy to kill. So it's mostly, in my opinion, a sideboard card or a metagame call, or whether you want to play that card or not. But in the right deck, in the right situation, it can be very impactful. So are we rating this start C tier? I don't think it's strong enough to be rated B tier, but it's definitely going to go into relatively high C tier. Probably over the Starwing Scout, probably over Bib, probably over the Mining. Yeah, I like to place him here over for the first the Skirmisher. That's a good place. So you get the C tier Rogue Leader Skirmisher just above. That makes sense to me. Next we got Regional Sympathizer, which is a very simple card that is mostly meant for drafting. No immediate impact on the game. Very bad stats for its price. Yeah, Sympathizer is simply not good enough to see constructed play. This is going to go into D tier pretty straightforwardly. The Restore 2 is quite good, so I'm going to place this over here. Yeah. Next we got Snowspeeder. So Snowspeeder is a card that can be very impactful if played against the right play the right units. But the thing is, it's so the on-attack ability is just extremely specialized. First of all, it's not really the fact it's on attack means that you have to play him and then you have to attack with him for this ability to have some sort of impact, and you have to be attacking first. So this ability is just, even if you're playing against a deck that plays like reinforcement walkers or those kind of super big ground vehicle unit that are super high value if you can exhaust them, even in that context, the Snowspeeder is simply just incredibly situational. This is an incredibly situational ability. So this card, for the most part, is going to be a 3/6 for 5 ambush, and that's going to be like the bottom ability is so incredibly situational that it is mostly what you're paying for if you include this card into your deck. You're getting a 3/6 for 5 ambush. Is that good enough? The answer is no. The answer is there's so many better things to do for 5 resources. In terms of like ambush unit, for 5 resources, you're gonna have cards like Agent Callus. You're gonna have cards like Skiff, like Escort Skiff. You're gonna have cards like well, on top of my head, I can't give you other examples, but there's plenty of other better 5 ambush units that comes into play at this stage of the game. There's just so many better things to do than playing a 3/6 ambush. By playing only one more, you get the skirmisher, which is so much better. So, is there like a world in which we see a ton of ground vehicles seeing play, and suddenly Snowspeeder's ability becomes good? And in that context, I can definitely see Snowspeeder being good. But this day has not come yet. There's simply not the critical mass of ground vehicle that makes this card any good. And once again, the bottom ability in that context becomes just incredibly situational. So for me, the Snowspeeder, unfortunately, despite being such an iconic vehicle of the Star Wars universe, is unfortunately not playable as of now. So I'm going to place this in D tier. I'm going to place this at the bottom here, below the Cloud City Guard. Moving on, we got Medal Ceremony. So Medal Ceremony was one of the hardest cards to evaluate for people, and it's still a card that many people debate over whether this card is good or not. And nobody has the clear answer to that question yet. I think that in Star Wars Unlimited, it is okay to be situational if you are super high impact whenever you are useful. And Medal Ceremony is definitely one of these cards that most of the time you're going to be resourcing it and not really do much with it. But there's going to be some situation where you're going to be able to play it and it's going to be super impactful. So one of the big things about Medal Ceremony is like it costs 0. And that is super relevant in aggro, because in aggro typically you're going to be trying to optimize every single resource you have. And the ability to boost your unit for 0 is just incredibly powerful, especially if its bonus is permanent. So usually the way you play this, you want to play this in an aggro deck, of course. You attack with all of your units, and then if your opponent does not deal with those units, you can punish him so hard by playing Medal Ceremony and playing like some extra experience count on it. Another way to use Medal Ceremony that is a bit less flashy but very effective as well is that simply sometimes you play Medal Ceremony on just one unit. Usually it's going to be your leader, your Sabine, which is usually he's going to be able to attack and stay alive most of the time because relatively high HP. You can play Medal Ceremony and then suddenly your Sabine has 3 attacks, and most importantly it has 6 HP, meaning that it doesn't get killed by a bunch of stuff. It doesn't get killed by Force Choke, it doesn't get killed by takedown. Suddenly it becomes so much harder to deal with it. There's a massive difference between being a 2/5 and a 3/6 in this game. So this is a very high impactful play in certain. So playing Medal Ceremony just to give a +1/+1 counter to something for 0 is sometimes absolutely worth it. Yes, there's going to be a lot of times where this card is not going to do what it's supposed to do, and it's going to sit in your hand and not do anything. And this is why I don't necessarily recommend it as a 3-of. But in the right situation, it has been a card that has been impactful over and over again. And I think it would be a mistake to not include this card into your aggro deck because it's so impactful when it's impactful, and once again, when it's not, you just gotta resource the card and it's no big deal. So I'm gonna place this card in B tier as a solid. It's one of those cards which is specialized, but in situation in which it's good, it's really amazing. I'm gonna place this over Bending Two Tubes, probably over Yularen. Yeah, probably over Yularen. Yeah, around there in the B tier category, I think is a good place for it. It's just also, of course, it's Heroism, so it doesn't disturb your 4 cards, I believe in, which is also very relevant. Last, we got You're My Only Hope. So this is a sort of a gambling card where that I think that you play, and if you get something big from it, this card can be very strong. This can potentially allow you to play a 5-drop for 3, which is pretty relevant. The ability, if your base have 5 less remaining HP, that is something that's very rarely relevant. Very rarely are you ever gonna be able to play this card for free. But yeah, pretty much the card is you play this and you're hoping to get a 5-drop. This is obviously a gamble card that is good if you are capable of kind of controlling the top of your deck. Right now, the only card in Heroism that allows you to really control the top of your deck is R2D2, but even that is not super reliable, to say the least. So currently there's not the support to make this card work. Right now, if you're playing this card, you're basically playing the lottery. There's going to be some situation where it's going to be amazing, and there's going to be a lot of situation where it's going to be terrible. So right now, in the current stage of the game with what we have, this card is not playable. It's not a good card. I would rate this really low. It's very low impact. It's very low impact. Once again, you're always going to prefer to play a card that you've chosen rather than play from the top of your deck. And the chance of this card whiffing and not finding something good is just way too high for this to be worth it. So You're My Only Hope is unfortunately not really playable and is going to go into the D tier category. I'm going to place this card, I'm going to place this card really low. Obviously there's some cases where it does some insane stuff, so this is worth mentioning. And that's it for all the Heroism card. Next time we'll talk about the neutral card, so it's going to be a short video, and we're probably going to take that opportunity to also rearrange some of the stuff and maybe kind of like rethink about some of the cards and replace them to have a more accurate ranking. Thank you for following again, and see you next time.